Hello everyone, what's up? So yeah, by now I think most of you have watched the Queen's Gambit. If you haven't, please do so as quickly as you can. It's an awesome series about chess. We've been waiting for this for a long time, and yeah, hopefully it's going to get more people in the game. It's gotten quite popular. It has had critical acclaim, and yeah, I'm really happy about this nice turnaround. Yeah, so I won't be speaking much about the series in this video because I hopefully plan to review it. But I'm going to be so this series is mostly trying to take all the games or snippets of games that are present in this series, and hopefully we can do this for other chess shows as well, because there are many, but there are some. Especially in TV there's a bit of a dearth of these shows, but yeah, now we have. Hopefully this will get the ball rolling for more chess on TV. Anyway, so we're going to kick off this series with an epic match. It's in episode 2. If you don't want any spoilers, stop the video now. Yeah, so in episode 2, Townes is playing against Harmon. And here, I predicted, to be honest, that Harmon will crush Townes. It wasn't quite a crush, but yeah. So the point... not the point, I mean, the thing is, Townes is underrated at 1700 and whatnot, but it was obvious she was going to go far in the tournament. But I didn't expect her to beat Beltic. I thought they might draw or something, and then like she'd win the tiebreak or win on tiebreaks. Yeah, anyway, so let's take a look at the game. So while I was watching, I saw e4. I was like, okay, we're going to get e4, nice. Beth likes to play e4 as well, so we're going to get e4. Okay, normal opening. Then Beth kicks out d5, the Scandinavian. All right. So I was like a bit taken aback when I was first watching this. And whoa, d5. Okay, so e takes d5, standard, and now c6. c6. The Blackburne-Kloosterboer, I think. You guys can see the name. Hopefully, Kloosterboer. Yes, Blackburne-Kloosterboer opening gambit. So you're just sacrificing a pawn for 0 compensation. Actually, the engine gives more than a pawn advantage. So here, after d takes e6, knight takes e6, you're down a pawn as black, and that should be -1 according to the engine, or meaning +1 for white. But actually, it's even more than that. It's like +1.3 or +1.4. Actually, I have the position running right over there on my desktop. Yeah, that's it's 1.3, 1.4 changes its mind at depth 50 plus. And yeah, it's just a terrible opening. Now, something very important. Actually, Townes plays the best way, plays knight f3. You have to get your king side going. You have to add pressure to the e5 push, because that's what black wants to play. Black wants to gain space as such. So they go e5 here, and now bishop b5. Very important move. The point is that you're basically threatening to take, because if takes, well, you lose your king. Whoops, I did not mean to do that, though that would have been cool if Beth played that and won the game anyway. Okay, bishop g4 pinning. Now this is not possible because goodbye queen. So knight c3 is played, protecting against e4, which would also pin the knight and win. Knight f6, kind of renewing the threat, but you can't basically get away with castles, which should be the best move in this position. But instead, Townes takes and now takes. And here we get the second position in the game. So here they not stopped the scene, but they started looking at each other in kind of cinematic fashion, and then they switched over to this position. Now, by the way, something I have to mention here in this position, after knight f3, e5. Oh, actually, I forgot to mention 2 things. First of all, let me talk a bit more about the opening. Here, actually, instead of knight c3, you should just go h3. And if the bishop goes back, you keep attacking it, and then you can win the pawn safely. And if not, if the bishop takes, then you can take, and you're doing very splendidly because you're attacking this. It's just a clear pawn. So let me show you guys. So h3, if takes does occur, for example, queen f6 here, defending this pawn, and you know, suggesting a queen trade. Here we just take, and after takes, white is doing splendid here. The queens are off the board, so there's little danger. In this opening, there's some danger with queens on the board, so you just get them off, and it's just a pawn up endgame. And if the bishop goes back, of course, we go g4, bishop g6, and we take here. Let me turn on the engine, see what it gives. It gives plus 2.2, and apparently this has been analyzed before I thought it would start computing it. Anyway, and so here they showed the position up to here, and then they showed this position. So I had to reconstruct this position from here, but I'm basically sure this is the move order they went through. Okay, and then they reached the second position, which is this. Now, I'm pretty sure I got this right, but it's quite weird. Of course, it's black to move, otherwise white to move would just take. What I found weird is that this pawn is here. If you go back here, you remember the opening, right? Okay, this occurred. So how could there be a D pawn? How could there be a D pawn? I started asking myself. Either it came from c7 or e7 and it took something, then it's a d pawn, or it came from d7. And both, or the three scenarios, are impossible, as you can see. So this position actually cannot occur. But okay, they reach this position, and here Beth takes, queen takes h2, Harmon takes, and yeah, when I was looking at it, of course I didn't set it up, and I barely got to see the pieces precisely. So like Townes was kind of irate at this, and I was like, whoa, this is a big move, this is a nice move, but it's nothing actually. This position is actually even better for white. Actually, black shouldn't take here. What should they play? Let's check with the engine. Queen e6, yeah, I was going to suggest queen e6 actually. Queen e6 to get some checks in and just go from there. Queen takes h2 though. Knight takes h2 is very strange. You just take with the rook, and your knight is threatening a fork, your knight is threatening this pawn, and white is not, black is not doing well. But instead, knight takes h2, and now rook e7 protecting against this, and now rook g2 attacking this pawn. Now Beth beat Baltic, so that makes her rating about well, at least 2000, right? Maybe she overperformed, but yeah, we have to assume it's greater than that though, because she like beat him and crushed him. So let's say she's 2200 and she's playing a 1700 who's kind of underrated, so maybe he's like 1900, let's say, maybe 2000. Yeah, but this doesn't really look like a 2000 game. Why would queen takes h2 occur, and knight takes h2 is just almost unbelievable, especially in classical game, which is the time control they were playing. So yeah, this occurs, and then after this position they stop here, and then they show you this position. And this position is really study, like it's beautiful. And yeah, Bruce Pandolfini, who was the chess advisor for this series, well, why was he picked as the chess advisor? Perhaps because he had something also to do with the book, actually. You guys can read up on that. Anyway, so rook takes h6 here, and yeah, black has a stunning combination. He plays she plays king g7. See, this is the kind of language we should avoid. King g7, rook h5, and now king g6, which is really stunning. Okay, the rook can't go anywhere but here, or it could go to other squares, but you get to see why not. Yeah, so let's see. This gets met with a fork, and rook a5 gets met with a fork. Any square the rook goes to, here it gets met with a fork, here it gets met with a fork. It's just beautiful geometry, stunning geometry. And all of this after the king chases it around twice. I don't think I've even ever seen something like this. But yeah, so beautiful end to the game. But yeah, I'm pretty sure I got this right. The position here with the pawn on d6, it's impossible, because the position that arose from that, from the opening, is this. Okay, and we go forth to the game I picked for this video. So I'm going to show you guys a cute little game here. It's the highest rated game I could find where black wins. Actually, why didn't I change the perspective? Let's change the perspective. Let's make it black from the black perspective. Yeah, so the highest rated game in which the Blackburn-Kloosterboer Gambit scored a win. By the way, if you want to correct me on my pronunciation for Kloosterboer, I would be very happy about that. And the second thing, Kloosterboer is a bit of an obscure figure, so anyone who has more information about him, that would be great. Any chess historians, if they want to comment. Anyway, so yeah, black here is a 2300 rated player. Actually, if we go forward a little bit, you guys can see this is the only game in the database. He's rated 2371. His name is Milos Shekic, I guess, and Ivan Ju, or Ivan Yu, and 2286 for Mr. Evan or Ivan. Yeah, pronunciations of names. Especially when you don't know the nationality, it can be quite tricky to get the pronunciation right. Anyway, so if we go back, takes, and now knight c3 was played. Again, the most accurate is to play knight f3, and after e5, bishop b5. As we saw earlier, bishop g4, h3, takes, queen f6. We saw this line before. I just didn't show you guys d3. Check the earlier 5 minutes of the video. So knight takes, knight c3. Okay, not the most accurate, but fine. e5, you have to do this. You have to get your bishop out. The whole point of this gambit is to have free space for your bishops, so why not? Knight f3, developing the knight, must be done as well. Bishop c5, of course, we're going to attack the sensitive spot over here for white. And now bishop c4 should have been played with the idea of following up with d3. What's very important as white is not to fall behind in terms of passivity. Don't get too passive, don't crawl up in a ball, because that's what black wants. Black is down a pawn, but for that they have compensation in the form of activity, potential e4, potential f5. You want to try to stop that as white. You're up a pawn, yes, but if black gets activity, they'll be quite happy with that. So don't give them activity. Bishop e2 is a bit too passive. Knight g7, that's a very interesting move actually. You don't commit to knight f6 because you block the f-pawn, and we'll see later, or well, in just a few moves, that black does play this nice f5 move. Castles, very normal. And now d3. Again, don't block in your bishop, man. Passive. Bishop c4. Yes, you moved your bishop twice, but you're rectifying your error. Now you play d3. And your bishop is outside of the pawn chain. It's doing something. It's blocking this f5. It has activity. He plays d3, and this is just too passive. Okay, and now finally black plays f5. More accurate was h6, preventing any of these ideas. Bishop g5 or knight g5. Maybe knight g5 is more important. And now you can safely play f5. It's always important when you play this f5 move to preface it with h6. Not always, but usually, to be able to stop knight g5, and because knight g5 would have some incursions over here on e6. Okay, white plays king h1. Yeah, getting kind of out of the line of fire, I get that. But actually white should have embraced this and went into the line of fire with d4. Freeing up for this bishop, freeing up for this check as well, and actually white stands much better here. Let's take a look at some recaptures. If bishop takes d4 here, you go knight b5, attacking the bishop twice. If black loses this bishop, that's a big chunk of the attack gone, so black would just be down a pawn. So they try to keep it, but now comes check. King has to move, and now knight d6, and the f7 square is very tender. Note that queen e8 is impossible on account of knight takes. And well, rook e8 is impossible on account of knight f7 check. But that was a mouse slip by me. And if we return here, if d4, well, e takes d4, well, knight a4. You have to keep the bishop, but now c3. And if I take, for example, there's queen b3, check, and rook d1, queen c7. Just normal moves, gaining tempos on black. And here, after knight takes c3, white should have a clear advantage. Okay, I get the material is equal, but look at the pieces. White has a lot of, well, g3 could be played. The bishop doesn't really have a good square. There is a lot of pressure over here, pressure from this side. White is just actually almost winning, I would say, in this position. Now, if you play this position against a strong player, you'll know what I mean, how bad black's position is. It It might not look like it, but really it is. Okay, so king h1, bit passive, getting out of the way, but yeah, not really warranted. And now a6, getting a space for the bishop. But actually it was not necessary. Black could have played knight g6 and aimed for some kind of play on the king side with the knight, maybe perhaps knight h4, maybe even knight f4, maybe f4 simply, but that would give up e4. It depends, but the knight is just quite well placed here. And we're not afraid of any knight a4 picking up the bishop because we just retreat to d6. Okay, but a6 was played. It's a fine move. Actually, compared to knight g6, not so much, but okay. Bishop e3, very accurate, trying to trade off this light square, dark square bishop, and of course black has to refuse that. Black's attack is built on this bishop, not this bishop, though this bishop can help, but this bishop, it's the big one. It's the important one in the attack. So d4 finally, brilliant actually by white, that he's kind of rectifying his errors. But now comes e4. Of course, you don't want to take here and allow the center to become open, where white's pieces will start to jump in. Of course, the queen doesn't jump in immediately because of knight takes d4. But you get what I'm saying. The queen will eventually find its way, and you know, just a lot of pressure in the center and open position. So you don't want any of that. So we close it down. Always in these kinds of structures, when you have d4, you always meet it with e4. Well, almost always, of course. This is very typical of the Dutch defense. I have a lot of content by mistake about the Dutch because one of our chess warriors, Mr. Joe Assad, as well as Adib, sometimes they play the Dutch. Okay, but Joe is the real expert on the Dutch. And bishop c4 check. Now, prefacing it with knight g5, then bishop c4 check would become a big issue. That, I think, was more accurate. Instead, he commits to bishop c4 check. Okay, that's fine. King h8, now knight g5, but now comes queen e8. Now you're able to cover. Okay, and now white basically commits the error that kind of, well, not loses the game, but leads to a very downward spiral where the advantage is evaporated and actually black stands better. f4 completely destroys white's game. White was actually slightly better after d5, but after f4, white is much worse. Much worse, I would say. It's the fair statement. The fair assessment. d5 instead would be is much better because, sorry, if white would play d5, first you get some squares for the knight with knight e6. After h6, you're not forced to go back to h3 as happened in the game. And here you have more squares for your bishop and potentially your knight. And just overall, you're also gaining space and asking this knight some questions. Now, of course, the knight will come to e5. An argument could be made for a4, but e5 is the more natural square, where it has more potential as well. The bishop goes back, of course, and now knight g4 attacking h2. h3, we want to get rid of this, but now takes. Okay, of course, white has won the bishop pair. He has some nice bishops. But after something like h6, you have to kick this knight away. You don't want it to stay here for long. Now you have to give up the bishop pair. And after rook d8, okay, this position, probably white is fine, I would imagine. Or maybe very slightly better, yeah. But instead he plays f4. And now if en passant, well, yeah, white would kind of be justified and would take back on the knight with the knight. But of course not. b5. Attacking the bishop. The bishop moves back, which is actually not so accurate. More accurate was inserting d5 once again, because now if takes, for example, black's bishop is attacked and they move back, or they can play queen takes c6, or at least consider the move. This position, black has the bishop pair. They are they down a pawn even? Well, they won't be down a pawn, so yeah, it's a bit better for black, but not completely losing. Well, the game continuation isn't completely losing, it's just very bad. And instead of d5, there's also bishop e2, but now in this position there's actually h6, and here you're forced again to play d5, because otherwise you'd be much worse off. It's very important to play this move to gain space and get your bishop some scope, because in the game actually the bishop was kind of very bad as well. So So, and if the knight goes back, knight h3, there's simply bishop b7, and we have a beautiful set of bishops here. They might not seem like much right now, but just open up the game quite slowly. You're going to open up the game, and they're going to be brutal. So bishop e2 was an option, but not so accurate. Better was d5. And both moves actually are better than the game continuation, which is bishop b3. This simply gives away the bishop pair, and the important bishop at that. This is the bishop you want on the board. This bishop is hemmed in by the pawns. And that's why d5 is so important, because it opens up a space for this bad bishop. So knight a5, bishop e6. Okay, trying to go for tricks, but just h6. Takes with the queen to control e6. We don't take with the rook, because perhaps knight e6 could be allowed. So takes, and now the knight comes back. Now, funny enough, actually the engine suggests something really crazy here. It suggests just giving up the piece. Of course, black would be winning here, but yeah, the engine thinks that's one of white's best choices. Shows you how much the position is bad for black and for white. So queen h5 is another alternative, but yeah, just go here, and now the knight has to move, knight h3. So he just plays knight h3 immediately. Knight c4, very nice move, attacking this bishop and attacking this pawn. Only move is bishop c1, and now comes b4. More accurate than b4 actually was bishop b4. The point is to get this knight here and just simply fork white. And there turns out to be little that white can do about this. Let's consider if the knight goes here. Of course, one threat is also taking, and after taking you take here because you're on the knight twice, while white would be only defending it once. Okay, so knight e2, and now comes the brilliant knight d5, threatening this. How would you get out of it? You can't. Your queen can't move anywhere, so you'd just be losing here. This gets met with this, and there are some tactics here, like if takes, you have to consider what happens after queen c1, because seemingly that would trap this knight if I were to take here. The point is to take here and the knight is trapped, but of course I can just take the queen, and now the knight is not trapped. So black would be completely winning here. They would be up the exchange. And by the way, in this position, if queen b3, I just take, and if you take here trying to trap my knight again, well, I can just escape. Okay, and so instead, after bishop b4, instead of knight e2, which we just looked at, there's also knight b1. Okay, but I mean, just look at this, and after you look at this, tell me if white is going to survive this. No, white should be completely lost in this position. I don't know how, I don't know why, but yeah, he should be completely lost. This is a sample continuation. Okay, b4 was played instead of the more accurate bishop b4, but b4 is still fine. Knight a4, and now knight d5. Again, we get this beautiful set of knights. Queen c6 was an alternative, but he decides to preface with knight d5, which doesn't matter much because queen c6 is played in the game anyway. Here for queen e2 is the only move to prevent this fork over here. Rook e1 is preventing the fork, but after something like queen c6, b3 and knight b6, we see a similar continuation to the game, but instead the rook is worse placed. So yeah, that's not good. So let's see, queen e2, and something similar happens as the line we looked at. Queen c6 attacking the knight, it's defended and attacking the other knight, but now knight comes back simply, and the rook will come to c8. Takes, and bishop b2. Where else should the bishop develop? And now rook ac8. An alternative was a5 over here, but rook ac8 with this possible plan. One plan is to simply triple up on the file, as you can see by the arrows. Another plan is to put one rook on c8, this f rook, we put it on c8. And the other two pieces, the other two heavy pieces, the queen and the rook on a8, we use them to open up the a file. Both plans are possible, and there is a litany of plans actually here. Instead, rook ac8 was tried, which is a bit strange. But yeah, of course, black is still completely winning. g3 was played. a3 is an alternative just to get some breathing room for your rook, and maybe the bishop starts doing something. But yeah, it was not played. g3, and now rook c7, trying to double up on the bubble up and perhaps triple up on the triple up. Or the triple up. Okay, but now comes, and now knight f2. Knight f2. Okay, you're just getting the sidelined knight back to life. There was an alternative in a4, but after a5 it's an open question what white really has achieved, because the c pawn remains weak. A3 is not really good because after rook fc8, if you want to defend here, you're going to lose a pawn, and even if you defend like this, you're also going to lose a pawn somehow. Okay, so knight f2 instead of these. I like a4, even though after a5 it's not really clear what black has achieved. At least you gain some space on the queen side. Okay, knight f2, getting the knight back to life. Queen c6, further adding pressure here, and blocking queen c4, stopping queen c4. King g1, kind of mysterious move. Yeah, but white obviously didn't want to see anything bad happening over here, so he goes king g1, but now the tactic wins the game. Bishop takes f4, and actually white decides to just lose immediately and takes this bishop. It cannot really be taken. You have to play something like rook a1, and here there is a funny opportunity for black to go wrong. Maybe they go knight e3 thinking they win the bishop, but now actually after bishop c1, yeah, actually white equalizes here. But of course after rook ae1 you either play queen g6, where this cannot happen because of the pin, and even if it were not for the pin, this would like be crazy strong. And rook fc8 is also another alternative. You really can't take here because of taking and this mate threat, which we will see in the game. So takes, attacking the queen and threatening checkmate. So queen d1 is tried, and now e3, threatening checkmate from here. So d5 is played, but now queen g6, and black has to block, white has to block with knight g4, but now quite simply taking wins, and e2 is much stronger and actually wins immediately. So white just resigned here. I'll show you some of the lines. So for example, after e2, if takes here, we just promote with check. If queen d2, of course we just take, and this is checkmate. If the king goes back to h1, of course this is an easy checkmate. And if the king comes to f2, this is also a checkmate. One example, and the other example being king d4, queen takes d5, checkmate. So yeah, this is what happens after knight g4, and here we play the more accurate e2. But even f takes g4 wins, because after takes, and even though this might happen, we have 1,000,001 moves to win here. Actually, you can probably just simply go here, and black is up far too many pawns, and this pawn is quite dangerous. White's king is too open. So yeah, a nice game by the black player here, Mr. Milos. He really channeled his inner Beth Harmon, even though the movie or the series wasn't out when the game was played. Very passive play by white here. Bishop e2, I think, was the start of the downfall. And then d3, another downfall. King h1, no. Okay, this started getting better for white though here. But now f4 was the final mistake, and actually after this mistake black just crushed white. Some chances left here if d5 occurred at any point, even after like bishop e2 d5 here. But yeah, white didn't even find d5, and yeah, from then on the game was simply won by very direct means and very nice maneuvers and accurate play by black. So yeah, tell me guys if you like showing similar such games. I will see about the other openings we're going to have and the other positions we're going to have. And yeah, hopefully you got something out of this video, and hopefully you enjoyed the series as much as I did. And yeah, I encourage you to watch it and watch it and watch it, and just think about it. And hopefully this will bring about some more chess content for the wider public. Our game suffers from something. Something I like about bowling, for example, there are a lot of casual players, but not many. The professional scene is kind of lacking. Well, I guess in the US, the professional scene, even still in the US, like, you don't see many professional bowlers. But here in Lebanon, especially, professional bowling is like, no, out of the question. But casual bowling, of course, it's very popular. Our game, the Royal Game, has the opposite thing. Our game, the Royal Game, it has a lot of, not a lot, okay, but it has quite a few professional players. You hear a lot about them, but casual players, they're there, but not as common as like bowling casual players, right? Like everyone bowls, but some people, I think the amount of people who don't know the actual rules of chess, how to play, that's reasonably actually high. I think I would say it's more than 20% of the population. So yeah, I'll leave you with these thoughts, and hopefully we'll get a review out about this beautiful series. And yeah guys, enjoy, take care, and au revoir.